Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a first impressions to do for you. This is the TRM Atom, and if you're not familiar with TRM means Three Rivers Manufacturing. Three Rivers Manufacturing, or TRM, I'm just going to call them TRM from now on to make it simpler throughout the video, is becoming one of my favorite knife companies. This is my second model from them. You might notice it looks remarkably similar to my TRM Neutron, which if you've watched my review of, you'll know I love. If you've watched my steel preference video, you'll see it's in there. If you've watched my secondary carry knives video, you'll notice it was one of my favorites in that video. The TRM Neutron has just, I have thoroughly fallen in love with it. So I've wanted an Atom as long as I've wanted a Neutron. I knew that the two were about a half an inch difference in size and had some subtle differences, but we're like brothers, right? They look almost identical, at least from the show side, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't want this to be a comparison video, but I think it's worth explaining because so much of what I've said about the Neutron and so much of what I love about that knife and how it's kind of set a benchmark in what I look for in knives moving forward since owning it, which is really cool when knives do that, by the way. When you get a knife and it changes your expectations of all knives that you get moving forward, that's a great thing to me. I love when that happens. And the Neutron genuinely did that for me because the Neutron is so thin and it is so slicey and it carries so well and it feels so good in hand and it cuts so well. Is it the most comfortable knife in hand that I have? No. But for how thin it is, goodness, the carry, the ease of carry, the greatness of carry to fantastic use ability it has, ratio going on, just fantastic. So I've wanted a Neutron, or an Atom, as long as I've wanted a Neutron. When I first started hearing about TRM and I saw the Atom and the Neutron, both of them, I wasn't totally sold just looking at them. The aesthetics of them before owning them didn't excite me. I still don't think it's an exciting looking knife, but it's grown on me, certainly. But they both, from the show side, really, to me, look virtually identical. It's hard to tell if you're just seeing it from this angle, which one it is, unless I'm giving you some kind of scale to see the size, or you're so familiar with my hands that you could tell that it would be like this if it was a Neutron and like this if it's an Atom. I mean, they look about the same to me. But neither of them spoke to me in an aesthetic sense, but I just kept hearing more and more people raving about them, and not just about the knives, but about the company behind them. And so they bumped up the priority list of what I wanted to try and what I was looking to buy. The kind of difficult thing can be with TRM knives, they make them in relatively small batches because it's just a couple of people. They make them here in the US, and it's a somewhat small staff of people who really care and are putting heart and soul into these batches of knives like other companies just aren't. And because of that, they don't make that many at a time. And so the best thing is also the worst thing, because if you want one, you can't just go on the website any day of the week and order whatever one you want and have it show up. You have to wait until there's a drop, or you have to buy secondary. So as soon as I really decided and had the money in my account, TRM money, to buy one and started looking, the first one that came up was the Neutron. So that's why I bought the Neutron. It wasn't because I wanted a Neutron more than an Atom. I wanted both. Frankly, I knew the difference from what I could perceive was about a half an inch. Do you want a 3.5 inch blade, or do you want a 3-inch blade? I like both of those sizes of knives. I like the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3. I own both. Different knives for different situations, but both have their place in my collection. So it's kind of the same thing here. So I found a Neutron first and I got it and I loved it. That's a knife that I don't think I'm going to be selling. I don't know. It's hard for me to say this will be a forever knife. Like, there's no real sentimental attachment to it. I could just get a different one and I'd be fine. But the Neutron has a place for me. I really, really love that knife. So when I found an Atom that popped up, and not only just an Atom, but my handle scale material preference was OD Green Micarta, which is what I was able to find for a reasonable price from somebody who I trusted on Instagram. I jumped on it, and now I have an Atom. So I wanted OD Green Micarta, but something really cool happened as well. I don't know if you can see with that much clarity, but this one has heat anodized bronze hardware, and that's all fine and dandy. I'm sure a couple of people have heat anodized their hardware to make it bronze. Even the clip screws are bronze, which is cool. But here's the trick. With the TRM Atom, these thumb studs, you'll notice, don't have a spot for a screw. These don't screw in. These thumb studs are press fit, which means to take them out and put them back in yourself at home without the proper tools is virtually impossible. So the guy that I bought this from, heat anodized them and sent the knife and the studs to TRM, and they reinstalled them, from what I understand. I think I've got that story correct, but TRM was involved in getting these thumb studs on heat colored bronzed. So I think as of this moment, this is the only TRM Atom in the world that has bronze heat anodized hardware, including thumb studs. The thumb studs being the one that makes it the only one. I'm sure some probably have heat anodized hardware, but this one has the studs, which is awesome. And I dig, especially with OD Green Micarta, bronze hardware. Oh, it works for me. And the satin blade, it all comes together super, super well. I dig this a lot. So let's talk about this knife. Like I said, from this view, just looks like another Neutron, right? Like, I mean, if you could tell from this side that it's a Neutron, especially with these scales that don't have the pattern that some of the Atoms do that I've never seen on a Neutron, then it's really, really difficult to tell. But once you turn the knife this way, it becomes more apparent, because the Neutron has liners, full liners with scales that sit pancaked on top of them, right? Which is fine. I got nothing wrong with that type of construction. But I do think this is better. This has nested liners, kind of like the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. The internals of these scales are milled, the exact shape of the liner, so that the liner can actually set down into the scale. So I don't know if I'll even be able to show you, but you can probably see there's some shine in there. That's the liner, which sits flush with the scale material. So it's hollowed out and set into the micarta, which I think looks and feels better. I think it's a superior way to put together a knife, if nothing else, just because it's an extra step. And I assume it alleviates some of the weight because you're putting the materials like together instead of stacking them. So we've gained some thinness by doing that. It works really, really well. I think the thickness of this knife, frankly, is either about the same. It might even be slightly thicker than my Neutron, but for its size, like the scale of it, it feels absolutely right. And this being a 3.5-inch blade knife, that is exactly the spec of what I would carry as a primary knife and where I've been putting it since I got it. This is probably my slimmest primary knife, not only that I currently own, but maybe ever. The profile this way, it's just so thin, and I love that about it. So the liners would be the first thing that's different from the Neutron. The other thing that's the big difference is the clip, because a Neutron gets a kind of standard like 3-hole small, I don't want to call it stubby, it's not like a southern grind clip, but it's a much smaller little 3-hole non-deep carry, just shallow clip. And that clip functionally works great. I really like it, but I do prefer deep carry clips. Honestly, I just like the functionality of deep carry clips a little better. I like not having knife stick out of my pocket. I know some people like having a nub of knife to grab onto to pull their knife out of pocket. I don't work that way. I slide my thumb down along the actual like face of the knife here in the pocket, and then I grab probably on the clip. It's weird to demonstrate without having it in my pocket, but the way I pull a knife out of my pocket, I never grab it by this little butt here. It's not the way it works for me. So deep carry clips are my preference. Again, Neutron clip works great, but this clip is better. I will say the Neutron clip, however, this one there's a story behind, but the Neutron one has better retention for sure. It's more solid in the pocket. This one is a little loose in the pocket, and I'm going to try to bend it again a little bit. I say again because the first night after I opened this up, I stood up out of like a lawn chair, and this had just barely caught on one of the pieces of like string that held the lawn chair together, and it bent the clip out pretty bad. So I rebent it. It's a little loose in pocket the way it is now. That might just be because my rebending job was not very good. But I did notice when I first put the knife in pocket, it had less of a firm grasp than the Neutron did. So it's possible the first owner also had this clip bend and did the same thing that I did. So if that doesn't totally make it grabbier, then I might contact them and see if I can order a replacement clip and see if that's better. The way it is right now is acceptable. It's totally fine. It still works. It still has retention where I'm not worried about it falling out of my pocket or anything like that. I could do a handstand and this knife isn't going to come out of my pocket. But it would be advantageous for it to be a little bit grippier for my preferences. So we'll see. Oh, there's bugs everywhere. Anywho, what was I saying? The pocket clip is the biggest difference. Like, the liners are a big difference, but the pocket clip I think is the biggest difference. I really do. Everything else about this knife is basically just a scaled up Neutron. And a Neutron is basically a scaled down Atom. I don't know which one they made first, which one they made second. I think the Atom came after the Neutron, but I'm not positive. Both of them have tons of scale options. These scales, from what if I remember correctly, I'm almost positive, are quite a bit more expensive than the Neutron replacement scales. But that makes sense. These are internally milled. It's a more substantial process and component. So I guess that'll be what that is. But I think they're both just as easy to swap. There's literally just these two screws. You're done. And then on the clip side, it's those two screws and the clip screws. And that's it. And you can swap them. And the rest of the knife stays intact. The liners still hold everything together. The pivot screws stay in. So I love that about it. I will probably end up getting some additional sets of scales, at least an additional set of scales for this knife, because I would love to have this knife with carbon fiber scales. So for when I want to kind of dress it up, I wouldn't mind necessarily having an additional set of they've been doing really cool micarta patterns, or they're coming out with a titanium one. I think those are launching in July. I'm not sure. I'll have to look, actually. I don't know if the titanium ones are a frame lock. I think it's still a liner lock, so it might just be a titanium scale that sits on top of these. I don't know. I've seen them and thought they're cool ever since I first saw them announced, but I'm not positive on the construction of it. I will have to find out. But this one is OD Green Micarta, which is one of my favorite handle scale materials. I love it outdoors. I love it for a regular EDC, just around town, at the house, whatever. It's just a great material. It works so well. It rode up here in my front pocket as a primary today. Got super sweaty, and even when I pulled it out of my pocket, like literally wet with my sweat on the show side, it still had natural grip to it. That's part of what I love most about micarta, is it absorbs moisture without like growing or flexing or getting weird, and it still has grip to it, and it works so well. Yeah, first impressions of this knife are just positive across the board. 100% already loving it. There's no jimping anywhere other than on the liner lock, so that you can get a little more purchase on that tab. Functions great. In hand, I can just barely feel that that's there, but it doesn't bother me. I actually like that there's that little bit of jimping there, especially because it doesn't really sit proud of this scale. So I can feel that it's there, and it gives me a indexing point without being uncomfortable or harsh in any way. I can also choke up. I can choke back. This knife is comfortable in any grip that I have put it in. It's a nice neutral handle material while still having some natural kind of curvature to it. The way it fits in my palm is excellent. I adore the way this knife goes in hand. Is it the most comfortable knife I've ever owned? No. But for how thin it is, it shocks me how comfortable it is. Usually the thinner you make a handle, in my experience, the less comfortable it gets. It's hard to make a knife thin and comfortable, and they've done it here. So that is excellent that they've been able to accomplish that. Let's see if there's anything else. The blade. Should probably talk about the blade. It's a knife. The blade on this, I think they use the same stock thickness as they do on the Neutron, which is fantastic news. I'd have to put them side by side to be absolutely positive, but it's a nice thin blade stock with a nice tall flat grind, which means that this and the Neutron are both just some of the best cutting knives I've ever owned for what they're built to do. For being an EDC knife, they make EDC tasks unbelievably easy, whether it's cutting tape and opening boxes, whether it's processing the cardboard to throw it away, whether it's cutting through rope or cordage, whether it's cutting an apple, whatever you need to cut that a normal person would cut on a daily basis. That's not like hard use, like work knife type of stuff where you're going through drywall or something. I wouldn't pick this for that, but regular person EDC type tasks, these are just the best cutters. I mean, like, for sure, TRM has to be in my top 3 of makers at finishing a blade for real EDC use. It's phenomenal. And the edge they put on is just excellent. This edge, I believe, is still the factory edge. The way it came, there's the tiniest chip right here on the edge, but even where the chip is, it's still, like, this as a working edge will go forever. It's 20 CV, which is a steel that I love. I'm going to sharpen it to get that tiny chip out just because I'm OCD, but it's a fantastic edge. And the way that they grind the knife and sharpen the knife from factory is just some of the best that I've seen on a production knife, period. They kill it. They crush it. It's so good. So, first impressions are obviously very, very solid, very strong on this. I adore this knife. I really do. I love the material selection. I love the fit and finish. I love the action. Holes are better than studs, don't get me wrong. If this knife had a hole and I could spidey flick it, ooh, I would love it even more. I can spidey flick it, to be fair, but with thumb studs, it's not my favorite. However, as far as thumb stud knives go, this is one of the best. The way that the detent is dialed, the way that it rides on these, I think they're on washers. I'm 99% certain. Yeah, it's on washers. The way that it rides on these washers, it's buttery smooth. And it's just so reliable on the deployment. The lockup is solid. This one, the action is better on this one than my Neutron. When I first pulled it out of the box, I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe they're about the same. Maybe it's because this one has a little more blade, so it's a little bit heavier. Maybe it's just the way this one's broken in and dialed. I don't know, but this one, I already love the action on my Neutron. The Atom is even better. This is just so good, so smooth. It blows me away how well done these knives are for how little they cost. Like, I think a lot of people, if they were to start a knife company and make a small production folder like this, the greed would set in pretty quick, especially with how popular these are. And I imagine if TRM really wanted to, they could charge $400 for this knife in this exact configuration, and people would buy it. They don't. They charge way less than that. I think this one, and it's hard because I bought it secondary, but I want to say getting one of these brand new, it's for sure under $300, which for 20 CV, finished and ground this well, micarta, finished, machined, shaped this well, nested internals, awesome deep carry pocket clip. All these components are things that they make here in the US, they're in-house. They could charge $400 for this knife and get away with it. Maybe $450, I don't know. But the fact that they charge what they find to be fair, and that it actually is fair for this knife, I think it's more than fair. And they deserve praise for that, because so many people would run with the ball on pricing as soon as it got popular. And this knife has become very popular. Everyone I know who's owned a TRM has really liked it, regardless of which model it is. And even with all the praise, all the people saying they're so great, and all the people trying to get them and waiting for drops, they still don't just like jack up their prices, which is really, really great to see. They just seem to be such honest people. I'm in the Facebook group. It's called Tycoons Really Matter, TRM. And not only the community in there, the people who are fans of this knife, who contribute to that page and post photos and ask questions and all kinds of stuff. It's an awesome group to be in. One of my favorites on Facebook. It's in the top 5 maybe, and I'm in a lot of knife groups on Facebook. But also the people behind the company are in that group, and they're talking to the people who already own their knives. Some people who are there who are just hoping to get in on the next drop, who want to be sure they're on top of the information, people who've heard good things, people who have all of their knives, people who have one of their knives. The people who are behind TRM are in there, and they're talking to people, and they're engaging with their clientele in a way that's really, really cool. So I commend them for the way that they engage with the community, the way that they put product out, and the product itself is so, so good. Anyway, this is a long first impressions at this point, but this knife deserves some spotlight for sure. It's funny, when I finally found this one, my brother's been looking for one as well. So if I find another one, I'll let him have it. But I was selfish and bought this one for me instead of telling him, hey, there's one out there. And when I got it, he was like, are you going to keep it and the Neutron? And I was like, we'll see when it gets here. I might just see which one I like better and then only keep one. And the more times I've put this in pocket and played with it, I can't really imagine at the moment letting go of my Neutron, but I don't think I'm going to be letting go of this one. I feel like I need to have both. So on first impressions, I think that speaks volumes. There will be a full review of this coming very soon. Be on the lookout for that. I'll make sure I have at least a week of experience with it, some opportunities to cut with it, etc. And I've done a little bit of cutting with it so far. It cuts like my Neutron, just with an extra 1/2 inch of blade, and it's phenomenal. So I imagine that review is going to be good, but maybe something will happen that'll change my mind. I don't know. Look for that review in about a week. And so far, very, very good with the TRM Atom. It is an excellent, excellent knife. And if you're not familiar with TRM, check them out on Instagram, check out their website, check out that Facebook group, because they're awesome, like I said, and they deserve your attention if you're not already giving it to them. They're some of the best in the community right now, in my opinion. So there you have it. This is a TRM Atom, and these are my first impressions of it.